Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, from Nairobi we join you with our best wishes on the occasion of the 10th meeting of Working Group 2 on climate change impacts, vulnerability and adaptation. As you set out to prepare the summary for policymakers, we want to join you once again by commending you for the extraordinary efforts that you have undertaken this fifth cycle of the IPCC, and also to express our strong commitment and support to the work that you have continued to take forward throughout the years, over 25 years by now, and sometimes also through some heavy weather. The IPCC Working Group 1 report, released a few months ago, already gave us a glimpse of quite how consolidated the work of the IPCC has become when it comes to the physical dimension of climate change. As you set out to complete the summary for policymakers on climate change impacts, vulnerability and adaptation, let me also say that we in UNEP continue to follow your work with the greatest interest. I'm often reminded that in the context of trying to help the world understand the consequences of global warming, it is sometimes like being in the evening in your home and watching the weather report. We may not fully understand all the factors that determine tomorrow's weather, but we take seriously the predictions of extreme weather events, how we should prepare for them, the mitigation of risks that we should consider, and also our ability to understand that in the absence of perfect scientific information, we do, however, make judgments on risks. It is quite clear today from Working Group 1 report, but also with all the other evidence that is emerging almost daily from scientific research and also from observing what is happening on our planet, that time is running out. Yes, climate change is a long-term challenge, but it requires urgent action. Through the work of Working Group 2, we begin to understand quite how serious the consequences are of not taking that long-term challenge with an urgent imperative of acting now. The costs of continuing to, in a sense, escalate the global warming phenomenon, of locking ourselves into high carbon infrastructure, the prospects of ever greater reliance on unproven technologies to cope with global warming and the consequent actions of reversing it, and also our ability to try and understand the costs of mitigation that will be compressed in an ever shorter period of time if we are to stay within the 2-degree target, are boggling, mind-boggling indeed. In fact, in some ways we are already seeing the dark clouds of climate change ahead, and yet the evidence from the emissions gap report and much of the work of the IPCC indicates that we are still putting the foot down on the pedal. We are accelerating carbon emissions. It is in this context that we must also realize that in a region such as Africa, and here in Kenya where UNEP is headquartered, the implications of adaptation on economies, on societies are already very significant today. In last year's Africa Adaptation Gap report, UNEP estimated that Africa is already having to expend between $7 to $15 billion a year in adaptation costs today. They are projected by 2050 to rise to $50 billion, almost half of the entire ODA budget of the world today. These are consequences, and these are also impositions on societies that have had little to contribute in terms of the problem, but are bearing insurmountable costs when you look into the future. Our work on ecosystem-based adaptation is another example of how we must understand that the response to climate change is not only a challenge and a cost, it is also an opportunity to move towards a more inclusive green economy, in which measures that may have an immediate benefit in terms of reducing emissions also translate into multiple benefits, be it in terms of public health, greater energy efficiency, greater energy security, a more efficient agriculture, and also an ability to invest in mitigation terms, but also achieve benefits in the adaptation and resilience capacity of societies. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the field and the connections between agriculture, forestry and climate change. Last year's Warsaw COP gave us a good signal that on the front of RED and RED+, we now are in a position to truly move forward as a global community. I urge you in your report to speak clearly to the world, and even when acknowledging that we may not be able, with our models and scientific projections, to answer all questions, it is our obligation, our duty to inform the world about the prospect and the risks that lie ahead of us. It is in the history of human nature and also of human societies that we have managed risks, that we have taken information, and particularly with the benefit of science today, we are able to make judgments about the future. It is time that as an international community, but also in every country, in every community, in every business, the challenge of climate change is understood both in terms of the enormous risks that it imposes already today, but even more so in the future on our societies and economies, but also about the enormous potential that we have with human ingenuity, with technology, with the right economic policies, and with taking science seriously for changing the future course of societies on planet Earth. From UNEP, we continue to extend our support to the work of the IPCC, and indeed we celebrate it 25 years into its existence. Its contribution, both in terms of its work in the past and also in terms of its future work when you meet in a few weeks' time in Berlin, is of immense importance. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, I wish you a very successful session in Japan, and may your voice be heard loud and clearly when you speak to the world in a few months' time. Thank you.